Have you ever wondered why you react to certain challenges the way you do, or why some situations just trigger that same old feeling of doubt or anxiety? Well, the answer, a lot of the time, lies in a blueprint. It's an inner design that was drafted for us long before we could even hold the pencil. In this explainer, we're going to dig into how that blueprint gets created and, way more importantly, how you can become its new architect.
We spend so much time obsessing over the trajectory, the next promotion, the 5-year plan.
Right, the exact milestones.
Exactly, the milestones that are supposed to define whether we've, made it. We just love this narrative that we are the architects of our own destiny.
The self-made captain steering the ship.
Yes, it's empowering, it's romantic. But when you really strip away the surface level stuff, that ambition, and you look at the engine room of the human personality, that whole narrative starts to wobble a bit.
It's a necessary delusion in some ways. We kind of need to feel like we're in control to get out of bed in the morning. But you're right, the reality is far more complex.
It feels less like we are the architects and more like we're the contractors. We're building on top of a blueprint that was drawn up for us before we even knew how to hold a pencil.
That's a great way to put it.
We're operating on a system where the core, our fears, our confidence levels, our default reactions to stress, even our relationship with food, it was all written by other people.
Mm-hmm. We aren't just running our own software. We are running on an operating system that was installed by our environment.
That is the perfect analogy. Think of it like a computer. You've got the hardware, that's your biology, your genetics, the raw material you're born with.
Yeah.
But then you have the OS, the operating system. For humans, that OS isn't, pre-installed at the factory. It's written line by code line by our early environment, our caregivers, and the company we kept when we were too young to choose that company.
And that's what we're really digging into today.
Right. It's an investigation into cause and effect. We need to connect the dots between, say, a grandparent's criticism back in 1995 and a CEO's inability to delegate in 2025.
It's almost like a forensic investigation into our own minds.
Yeah.
And we have a very specific two-part mission for this deep dive. First, we're going to do an excavation. We're going to dig into the past to understand how those early dynamics really established our psychological baseline. We have to look at the soil we grew in, but, and this is key, we aren't just going to wallow in history. That's a trap that, traditional therapy can sometimes fall into, getting stuck in the why.
Okay.
The second part of our discussion is the renovation, because the most important takeaway here is that biology is not destiny, and neither is history. Once you understand the blueprint, you can grab a red pen and start making changes.
I like that.
So we're going to look at the roadmap for reclamation, how to hack that baseline as adults to break lethargy, redefine what success actually looks like, and master the art of communication to heal those old wounds.
So it's not really a therapy session. It's more like a user manual.
A user manual for the human operating system that most of us never got to read.
Exactly. Let's start with that foundation then. There is this old adage, you usually hear it thrown around about teenagers and peer pressure. A man is known by the company he keeps.
Right. It's usually meant as a warning. Don't hang out with the bad crowd or you'll get in trouble.
But if we look at developmental psychology, we really need to tweak that phrase for the early years. Something more like, a child is grown by the company it gets.
That distinction is vital, the company it gets. As a child, you don't curate your social circle.
You can't.
You don't interview your parents or your grandparents for the job. You don't vet their emotional stability or their communication skills. You were just dropped into an environment, and that environment is the soil you grow in.
Children aren't just observers in that environment. They're sponges. We're calling this the sponge effect.
Right.
Let's drill down on that, on the sponge effect, because I think parents often comfort themselves with the idea that their lectures matter. I told my kid to be honest, or I told my kid to be brave. We put so much stock in the verbal instruction.
And yet the instructions are barely 10% of the equation. Honestly, it's probably even less than that.
Yeah.
Albert Schweitzer had this brilliant quote. He said, "Example is not the best source of influence. It is the only source of influence."
The only source. Wow.
Children absorb the way you handle stress. They absorb the micro expressions you make when a bill arrives in the mail. They absorb your moral compass, and not the one you preach, but the one you actually practice.
So if a parent lies to get out of a phone call, something small like, tell them I'm not home.
The child learns that lying is a valid tool for convenience. It doesn't matter that you gave a whole lecture on honesty the night before. The action completely overwrote the audio file.
It's subconscious programming.
Yeah.
It bypasses the logic centers of the brain because, those centers aren't even fully formed yet.
Precisely.
And one group that we often overlook in this programming phase is grandparents. We usually think of parents as the primary architects, but grandparents can be massive influencers in this company we get.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes sense structurally, right? Parents are often in the thick of the grind. You've got career stress, managing household logistics, the day-to-day discipline. They're the managers of the child's life.
Right.
Grandparents often occupy a different role. They can be sources of immense stability, wisdom, and unconditional acceptance because They aren't as pressed for time. They can listen in a way that parents sometimes just can't.
But we have to look at the flip side of that coin, too.
We do. Grandparents can also be the transmission lines for intergenerational trauma.
That's a heavy concept. We tend to romanticize the multi-generational home or the close-knit extended family. But if a grandparent is anxious or hypercritical, that impacts the child just as much as a parent, doesn't it?
Absolutely. Trauma travels through timelines. If a grandparent or any primary caregiver really is carrying unresolved trauma, chronic negativity, or deep-seated insecurity, they pour that into the child just as effectively as they pour love.
Which brings us to a really core distinction that defines the company we get. The difference between a secure dynamic and an insecure dynamic.
This is the root of so much adult dysfunction.
It really is. The shorthand for it is basically this. Strong people lift others up. Insecure people push others down to raise themselves up. It sounds simple, almost like a cliche you'd see on a motivational poster.
But the psychological implications are incredibly heavy. It all comes down to the mechanics of the ego. A secure caregiver, someone with healthy self-worth, views the child's independence as the goal.
That's the whole point of parenting, right?
You think so? They want the child to leave the nest. They celebrate the child's wins without feeling threatened. They empower. They look at a child's success and genuinely think that is wonderful for them.
Versus the insecure dynamic, where the child's autonomy, it actually feels like a threat to the parent's control.
Exactly. In an insecure dynamic, life is a zero-sum game. If you shine, my light gets dimmer. And this leads us to what you could call a hidden epidemic in family systems: narcissism.
And I want to be very specific here because that word gets thrown around so loosely on social media these days.
It does. We aren't just talking about the guy who takes too many selfies or just loves to hear himself talk.
No, we're talking about something more subtle. The covert narcissist. This is what really struck me. We usually picture the loud, boasting, show-off, that's the caricature, but the covert type is different. They fly under the radar.
The covert narcissist is much harder to spot, and in some ways much more damaging to a child's sense of reality because it's so insidious. These figures often hide behind facades of high morality.
How so?
They might be the most religious person in the community, the most charitable, the one who is always volunteering at the animal shelter. To the outside world, they appear perfect. Saintly, even.
And everyone tells the child, "You're so lucky to have a mother like that."
Exactly. But behind closed doors,
The mask falls off.
at home, it's a different story. They're emotionally abusive, critical, demanding, but they use that public image as a shield. If the child ever tries to speak up, who is going to believe them? Your mother is a saint. Look at all the charity work she does. How could you be so ungrateful?
It creates a total reality distortion field for the child.
It does. The child starts to believe that they are the crazy one.
And the dynamics inside that house are so twisted. It's not just that the parent is mean, it's that they actually engineer conflict. There's this concept of the golden child versus the scapegoat. It sounds like something out of a fairy tale, but for the people living it, it's a nightmare.
It's a classic control mechanism. A narcissistic parent often can't view their children as individuals. They're extensions of the parent's own ego. So to maintain control, they incite rivalry.
They deliberately play favorite.
Not just a little bit, but systematically. They use triangulation, where they'll talk to the sister about the brother, spreading falsehoods or exaggerations to keep them pitted against each other. Your brother said he hates your new job, when of course the brother said no such thing.
But why? I mean, what is the strategic benefit of making your own children fight? It just seems so counterintuitive to the idea of parenting.
Division is control. If the siblings are united, they might compare notes. They might say, hey, mom's behavior is really erratic, or dad's being cruel. If they're united, they can confront the toxicity.
What if they're fighting each other?
But if they're fighting for the parent's approval, fighting for the scraps of affection, the parent remains the unquestioned center of the universe. The parent becomes the judge, the jury, and the prize.
That is incredibly dark, but I can see how effective it would be. And for the child, this creates what's called walking on eggshells syndrome.
Hypervigilance. The child becomes an expert at reading the room. They analyze the micro-expressions on the parent's face. Is mom in a bad mood? Is dad about to explode? Did I just breathe too loud?
Wow.
They tune their entire existence to managing the parent's emotions. And this just erodes their own self-worth because they learned a terrible lesson. Their feelings don't matter. Only the parent's feelings matter.
It's the ultimate form of gaslighting.
Absolutely. You doubt your own reality because the person in charge just keeps rewriting the script.
So we grow up, we physically leave that house, maybe we even move to a different city, but we take those voices with us. We internalize the company we got. This brings us to a really useful framework called transactional analysis. I love this because it gives us a vocabulary for the voices in our heads that isn't just, I'm crazy.
It's a brilliant tool developed by Eric Berne. He basically said that our personality isn't a monolith. It's divided into 3 ego states. Think of them as internal recordings that play back depending on the trigger. You aren't just you. You are a committee.
Okay, so introduce the committee members for us.
First, you have the parent ego state. This is the recording of all the authority figures you had growing up. It's the shoulds and should nots. It's what you were taught.
And it can be good or bad, right?
Exactly. It can be the nurturing parent, the voice that says, it's okay, try again, you're safe. Or, if you grew up in the kind of environment we just discussed, it's the critical parent, the voice that says, you're stupid, you're going to fail, what will the neighbors think?
I think we all know that critical parent voice intimately. It's that inner critic that wakes you up at 3 a.m. So that's the parent. Then there's the child ego state.
Right. This is the recording of felt emotions from when you were little. It's the I want or I feel. It can be the free child, creative, spontaneous, playful, or it could be the adapted child.
And the adapted child is what exactly?
The adapted child is the one who learned to comply to survive. It's a part of you that gets anxious when a boss sends a vague email. It's the people pleaser. It's the one who is terrified of making a mistake because historically mistakes were dangerous in that household.
So when we're reacting emotionally in traffic, screaming at someone who cut us off, or we feel crushed by a minor piece of feedback at work, that's not us being rational adults.
No, that is the child taking over the steering wheel, or it's the parent beating us up. The goal of transactional analysis, and really the goal of maturity, is to develop the adult ego state.
The third member of the committee.
The adult is the computer. It processes data. It looks at reality objectively. It doesn't ignore feelings, but it isn't ruled by past trauma or old rules. It asks, does this belief make sense now? It's the mediator between the terrified child and the critical parent.
Let's apply this to a real-world scenario, the topper paradox. We see this so often. The academic superstar, the valedictorian who gets straight A's in school but then struggles. Or plateaus in the real world, while the so-called backbenchers or average students sometimes go on to run companies. Why does that happen?
This is a classic example of the environment shaping the outcome. School is a highly structured environment. The rules are crystal clear. Memorize this, regurgitate that, follow the instructions, get the reward.
And the topper has mastered that system.
They've mastered compliance. They are often operating from a very successful adapted child.
Yeah.
State-pleasing the teacher, who is the new authority figure. They are incredibly good at doing what they're told.
But life
What?
is not a structured environment. No one hands you a syllabus for your 30s.
Exactly. Life is chaos. Life is risk. Life requires you to define the problem, not just solve the one you're given. When the topper enters the real world, that entire structure vanishes.
And their confidence goes with it.
If their confidence is entirely built on external validation grades, gold stars, praise, they become terrified of making a mistake. Because if you aren't the smart one, who are you?
This is what you call the confidence trap.
Yes. If your entire identity is, I am the one who never fails, then a failure isn't just a stumbling block. It's a full-blown identity crisis. So what do? They retreat into the comfort zone.
They stick to what they know.
They stick to what they know. They avoid risks where they might look foolish. They stay in the job they hate because they know how to do it perfectly, and perfection feels safe.
And that leads directly to the lethargy loop.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The comfort zone feels safe, like a warm blanket. But if you stay there too long, it becomes a prison. You stop learning, you stop adapting, and eventually that safety turns into boredom and stagnation. The drive it erodes.
Meanwhile, the backbencher.
The backbencher, who was used to getting things wrong, who had to hustle, who didn't tie their entire self-worth to a report card, they are often much more resilient. They aren't afraid to look stupid, which, it turns out, is a superpower in business and in life.
Okay, so to summarize where we are, we've established that the critical parent voice, the fear of judgment, the need for external validation, and even our habits of people-pleasing, these were all installed early on. We were walking around with software that might be 30 years out of date.
And often that software was designed to help a child survive a very specific environment, like a volatile home. But it actively hinders the adult from thriving in the wider world. The survival mechanism becomes the stumbling block.
But, and this is the big pivot, biology is not destiny. The brain is plastic. We can rewrite the code.
We absolutely can. It is never too late to update the OS.
So let's shift gears. We've done the excavation. We see the ruins. We understand the ghosts in the machine. Now let's talk about the renovation. This is part 2, the reclamation.
And the very first step of reclamation is what I call the reset. It's accepting a paradox. You are not responsible for your programming. You didn't choose your parents. You didn't choose your school. But you are 100% responsible for your updates.
You can't blame your grandparents forever.
You can't. At some point, you have to say, okay, this is what I have to work with. Now, what am I going to do with it?
And the primary tool for this has to be self-awareness. It's catching yourself in the act. It's hearing that voice in your head and identifying it. Oh, that's my critical parent talking.
Or that's my adapted child panicking because the boss didn't use an emoji in his email.
Right.
It's about creating a tiny gap between the trigger and the reaction. In that gap, you can choose the adult response.
And one of the biggest areas we need to update is our understanding of ego and confidence. We tend to think of confidence as this binary switch. You either have it or you don't.
But it's much more useful to visualize it as a spectrum,
Okay, let's walk through that spectrum. On one end, you have insecurity.
which is the adapted child constantly seeking approval. Am I good enough? Do you like me? This is the person who apologizes when you bump into them. They try to take up as little space as possible.
And on the far other end, people usually place confidence. But this model says that's wrong. On the far end is actually arrogance.
Now, this is a crucial distinction. Arrogance is not too much confidence. Arrogance is actually insecurity wearing a mask,
It's a defense mechanism.
a very fragile one. It's the person who pushes others down to feel tall. It's loud, it's boastful. If you poke it, it bursts. The person who constantly needs to tell you how rich or smart they are is terrified you won't notice on your own. That is the narcissistic parent we were talking about earlier.
So what's in the middle? Where's the sweet spot we're aiming for?
Healthy confidence. And the definition of this can be surprising to some people. Healthy confidence is quiet. It's a grounded belief in your ability to learn.
So it's not about knowing all the answers.
Not at all. It's knowing you can figure it out. It doesn't need to prove anything to anyone. It's the person in the meeting who isn't afraid to say, I don't know, can you explain that to me?
This connects directly to the Dunning-Kruger effect, doesn't it?
It does. The Dunning-Kruger effect illustrates that people with very low competence often have very high confidence because they don't know enough to know what they don't know. Ignorance is bliss, as they say. But as you gain real competence, your confidence often takes a dip initially because you start to realize how complex things really are.
Yeah.
Real growth requires the humility to say, I don't know yet. That humility is a sign of a strong ego, not a weak one. A strong ego can withstand being wrong.
So if we want to move from either insecurity or arrogance toward that healthy, quiet confidence, we need strategies. We need to hack the system. We've identified 4 major areas for breaking the cycle. The first one is a big one, reframing failure.
We have a cultural obsession with winning. We treat life like it's a scorecard. But if you look at high performers who sustain their success, not just the flash-in-the-pan types, they have what we call a growth mindset. They view failure completely differently.
The phrase that really stuck with me was, failure is not a verdict, it's data.
It's the tuition fee you pay for wisdom. You have to shift the internal question. The insecure person asks, what will they think of me if I fail? That's the critical parent-inducing shame.
Right.
The confident person, the adult, asks, what did I learn from this? How do I adjust the variable for the next time?
There was also a beautiful point about sportsmanship in life. We usually think of sportsmanship as just, shaking hands after a game.
But it goes so much deeper. True sportsmanship is about redefining success itself. It's not about defeating others. It's about surpassing your former self.
So your only real competition is who you were yesterday.
Exactly. And if that's your goal, you can celebrate other people's success. You can help your opponent up when they fall. You play with grace because your identity isn't threatened by someone else winning. That is the ultimate sign of a secure blueprint. You are playing an infinite game, not a finite one.
Okay, so that's strategy 1. Strategy number 2, escaping the lethargy loop. We talked about the comfort zone being a trap. How do we break out? Because, physically, our bodies want to stay on the couch. Our brains want to save energy.
You have to embrace calculated discomfort.
Yeah.
You have to consciously do things you are bad at. This is vital for neuroplasticity. Adopt the beginner's mind.
So if you're a CEO, go learn to surf.
Go learn to surf. Go learn a new language. Put yourself in a position where you are clumsy and unskilled. It reactivates the brain's plasticity. It reminds your ego that it's okay to struggle. It proves to your adapted child that making mistakes doesn't result in death.
It desensitizes you to the feeling of looking foolish.
Exactly. And we also need to stop looking at the highlight reels of others. We suffer from this massive survivorship bias. We look at the millionaire and think they just rocketed to the top. We don't see the 10 failed businesses, the debt, the stress, the sleepless nights.
When you only look at the successes, you get a totally distorted view of risk.
You do. You think, everyone else is winning. Why am I struggling so much?
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge that the path is messy. And that liberates you to be messy too.
Which leads to strategy number 3, which is very practical, the compounding power of habits. This is very much in the atomic habits philosophy. You don't change your life, you change your daily routine.
The 1% rule. Small improvements compound like interest over time. But I want to focus on two specific areas where our childhood programming really messes us up: nutrition and money.
They seem like adult problems, but you're saying they're often childhood symptoms.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's start with the sugar trap. This is definitely a childhood relic for me.
Think about it. When you were a kid, what happened when you were good? You got a cookie. What happened when you scraped your knee? You got ice cream. We were conditioned from a very early age to view sugar not as fuel, but as emotional reward and emotional soothing.
We literally wired our brains to connect glucose spikes with love and safety.
We did. So as adults, when we're stressed out at work, we don't crave broccoli. We crave the dopamine hit of that cookie because our child ego remembers that's what makes the pain go away.
So breaking that loop isn't just about dieting or willpower.
No, it's about recognizing the emotional trigger. It's asking, am I actually hungry or am I sad? Am I hungry or am I just bored? It's also about understanding the physiological lethargy that comes from bad habits. The cultural habit of late-night dining, eating a heavy meal at 10 p.m., is a disaster for productivity. It destroys your sleep quality, which then ruins your focus the next day, which leads to more lethargy and more bad food choices. It's a vicious cycle. Hydration, gut health, avoiding that late-night insulin spike, these are foundational for the energy you need to reclaim your life. You can't build a new life if you are exhausted.
And on the financial side, there's the image trap.
This goes right back to that insecure dynamic we talked about. Why do people buy cars they can't afford?
To impress people they don't like.
To impress people they don't even like.
Yeah.
It's the adapted child inside, screaming for validation. Look at me, I made it. Please tell me I'm valuable.
So financial health is actually about suppressing the ego.
It really is.
Yeah.
Save first, spend later is the golden rule. But to do that, you have to be secure enough to not signal your status with every single paycheck. You have to be okay with driving the older car so you can let compound interest work its magic for you. It's about delaying gratification, which is the hallmark of adulthood. A child wants the marshmallow now. An adult waits so they can have 2 marshmallows later.
Okay, the fourth and final strategy, and this is framed as the ultimate game changer. Communication.
It is. It trumps raw talent.
Right.
It trumps IQ. You can have the best idea in the world, like Warren Buffett says, but if you can't transmit it, it's useless. He claims that communication skills can increase your value by 50%.
50%.
But in the context of our discussion healing relationships and personal growth, it's even more critical.
And we're not just talking about public speaking or writing good emails here. We're talking about listening.
Most people do not listen. They reload, they're quiet, but their brain is just formulating the next thing they want to say. That is listening to reply. We need to practice listening to understand.
Active listening, reading between the lines, observing body language.
And suppressing the ego's urge to interrupt. When you interrupt someone, you are implicitly saying, my thought is more important than your thought. You're invalidating the other person. If you can just sit, listen, and say, tell me more about that, you create safety, and safety is what heals relationships.
Now, how does this apply to the healing process with those difficult family members? If we have those toxic dynamics we talked about in part 1, how do we use communication?
Communication is how you set boundaries without guilt. This is where the I statement becomes an essential tactical tool. Instead of saying, you are controlling and toxic, which immediately puts the other person on the defensive.
And triggers their critical parent.
Exactly. You reframe it. You say, I feel anxious when our conversations turn to this topic, so I'm going to step away for now.
That shift is subtle, but it feels incredibly powerful.
You take responsibility for your feeling. It's very hard for someone to argue with I feel. If you say you are, it's an attack. If you say I feel, it's a disclosure. It de-escalates the conflict while still protecting your space.
And what about repairing relationships? There was this concept of repairing the awkward.
This is a lost art. We have these awkward moments, a fight, a misunderstanding, and we just let them fester. We sweep them under the rug because it's uncomfortable. Repairing requires you to strip away the ego and apologize.
And a real apology isn't, I'm sorry you felt that way.
That's a non-apology. It's a deflection. A real apology is, I'm sorry I did X, I understand it hurt you, and I will try not to do it again. That vulnerability is strength. It's the adult ego state in action. It shows you value the relationship more than your need to be right.
It seems like all of this, the habits, the confidence, the communication, it all just circles back to awareness.
It does. You have to wake up. You have to stop running on the autopilot that was installed by your 5-year-old self. You have to consciously decide to be the driver of your own life.
So let's try to synthesize this. We started with a blueprint handed to us by others, our parents, our environment, the company we got. That was part one. We acknowledged the cracks in the foundation.
Mm-hmm.
But through self-awareness, through reframing failure as data, through building new atomic habits, and learning to communicate like an adult, we become the architects of the renovation. That's part two.
We reclaim the house. We finally make it ours.
I want to leave our listener with a final thought, something to chew on that comes from the very edge of this discussion. We've talked a lot about our past and our present, but there's that old phrase, child is the father of man.
It means the child you were shaped the man you are today.
Right. But it also implies a cycle. If you are listening to this and you have children or nieces or nephews, or even if you manage young employees, you are now the company they are keeping. You are the environment. You are the soil.
That is a heavy responsibility.
Yeah.
But it's also a beautiful opportunity.
The habits you build today, the emotional intelligence you cultivate, the way you handle your own stress, you aren't just doing it for you. You are demonstrating the user manual for the next generation. So the real question is, are we passing down our trauma or are we passing down our healing?
That is the ultimate question. The renovation isn't just for us. It's for the tenants who are coming in after us.
Trust the journey of self-improvement. It really is worth it. Happy journey.
Happy journey.